Hey guys, welcome to our final section, Working with Repository Manager. Previously, we discussed about various functionalities of Informatica Power Center Designer, also Workflow Manager and Workflow Monitor. At this stage, we all have the understanding of various components of Informatica Power Center tools. For instance, we learned about sources, targets, transformations and mapping, workflows and tasks, execution process, logs, and other problems. We're now at our last client tool, Repository Manager. Repository Manager is not used for any coding-related activity. It is used for administration activities, which we've already seen in previous videos. That's where we've configured our domain and added repository and folder. The other use of Informatica Power Center Repository Manager, which is for the deployment or the migration purpose. As you all understand, the deployment and migration activities are carried out to take your codes from this development to test and from the test to the production environment Informatica. When you work in a real-time setup in an enterprise level, you'll be able to see 3 or 4 repositories displayed here, each repository pertaining to an individual environment. You may see the name of the repositories, like repo dev, repo test, or repo prod. They pertain to developments in development and test and production environments. Repositories in Informatica are synonyms to the environment. As you understood, migration activity in Informatica is copying the code from one repository to another. Before we see the migration activity, we'll see the basic sections of the repository manager. This section here where my cursor is located is referred to as the navigator. This is referred to as object browser. That's where we'll be able to see the various objects inside a particular folder. The bottom section here is the output panel. You may have noticed in the designer screen, the navigator section displays source, targets, mappings, along with the transformations, components, which are required to create a mapping. The Workflow Manager shows the components like workflows and tasks, which are required in Workflow Manager. As you can see, the Repository Manager shows sources, targets, mappings, workflows. Also, it shows the transformation, maplets, and worklets. Repository Manager is a centralized repository which contains the objects which are individually present in Designer and Workflow Manager. Let's see how to use the Repository Manager screen to do the migration activities of our components. We can actually do the migration from the Designer screen, even the Workflow Manager and Repository Manager. As you may have identified or understood from the Designer screen, we could do the migration of mapping-related components. From Workflow Manager, we can migrate workflow-related components. But from Repository Manager, we could do migration of all the components which are present in Informatica Power Center. First, let's see how to do the migration of Informatica Power Center Designer. Because we have only one repository present, we'll see how to do the migration from the LearnWell folder to Administrator folder. This is exactly similar to how you do migration from one repository to another when those are available. Before we start migrating, we need to understand what all various components need to be migrated. As you may be aware, we need to migrate all sources, targets, mappings, workflows, and tasks that are used in the code. Transformation and tasks get migrated along with mapping and workflow. You do not need to migrate transformations and tasks separately. If your code is having parameter files and Unix scripts, you need to migrate them separately. Those are not migrated from Informatica tools. We'll see about parameter file and Unix scripts later in this video. There are 3 options from which the migration activities can be performed. First, we'll see the simplest of the options, which is the drag and drop option. To understand the drag and drop, we first need to understand the importance of connect and open option present when you right-click on a particular folder. I'm going to right-click on LearnWell, and connect and open is disabled. This means I'm currently using Informatica Power Center Designer to do activities in the LearnWell folder. If I right-click on the Administrator folder and click on Open, we'll now have the Administrator folder in bold. You can also see the Administrator folder displayed, which means workspace is now allocated to the Administrator folder. You could switch the folders just by clicking on this section, and if I select LearnWell, it'll take me to LearnWell. As you can see, LearnWell is in bold. That's the advantage of Open. To understand process, as you can see, the Administrator folder is all empty. We'll now try to migrate some code from LearnWell to the Administrator. Because we need to make changes into the Administrator folder, I need to assign my workspace to Administrator. I'll select a particular code from LearnWell folder. Suppose I need to migrate m_pass_through from Learnwell to Administrator. To the simplest of solutions, you are offered the drag and drop migration option. When I select a particular code, I could simply drag and drop. Because I'm migrating a mapping, by opening Mapping Designer in your workspace, you could simply drag and drop the code from Learnwell to the Administrator folder. Once you drag and drop, it'll ask, do you want to copy m_pass_through? Click yes, and as you can see, these components are now present in the Administrator folder. With this in mind, we just saw one of the simplest ways to do migration. The same process could be performed in Workflow Manager for migrating workflow-related components. Second option is copy and paste. Select the particular mapping. Click on Edit in Toolbar. Click on Copy. Now click on Administrator folder, then Mapping. Click on Edit, then click Paste. As you can see, it'll again ask, do you want to copy m_pass_through? You'll click Yes. It's now giving you some conflicts because the same components are present inside the Administrator folder. You could simply rename, reuse, replace, or skip option. I'm going to select Replace. Once I click Replace, new components will be copied to the Administrator. Click on Finish. Now as you can see, the code is migrated. The same features can be used in Workspace in the Workflow Manager to migrate the workflow-related components. This brings us to the end. In this video, we learned how to migrate code from one folder to the other by using drag and drop and the copy-paste feature.